David Leaner got dressed in his usual suit that morning, drank his coffee, and thought he was getting ready for another day full of meetings. Appointments on his calendar, briefing folders prepared by his assistant, billion-dollar projects. Everything was in place, but something inside him had snapped, quietly and suddenly, like a steel wire cracking without anyone seeing. In the middle of a video conference, he stopped speaking mid-sentence, took off his headphones, and stood up. Without saying a word to anyone, he walked out of the building. As he closed the car door, he tossed his phone onto the back seat. No matter who called, they wouldn't be able to reach him anymore. He had no idea where he was going. He just wanted to get away from tall buildings, glass offices, and a life that was too planned. After driving for 4 hours, his eyelids started to feel heavy. While his eyes scanned the road for a gas station or a market, a building suddenly caught his attention. It looked like a wrecked part of the roof was sagging, the sign hanging on by a single chain, the windows cloudy. Normally, he would have driven right past a place like that without slowing down. But that day he stopped. His foot hit the brake. It was instinctive, as if the past had called him to that exact spot. And David couldn't ignore the call. He pulled into the empty parking lot. The only sound coming from the building was the faint clinking of cutlery in the distance. When he pushed the door open and stepped inside, not even a little bell rang. It was like time had stopped. The place was dim, but warm. Sunlight slipped through the dusty windows and drew soft lines across the wooden tables. There were no customers, no waiters, but it didn't feel abandoned. More like it was waiting, like a stage, waiting for its actor. He slowly sat down at the table by the window, loosened his tie. The exhaustion wasn't just physical. It was more like a long-building emptiness that had been rotting inside him for years. He rested his head in his hands. Maybe a few seconds passed, maybe a few minutes. But when he opened his eyes again, a little girl was standing across from him. Around 6 years old, light brown hair, neatly braided, a white t-shirt with a red apron tied over it, a tiny notebook and pen in her hand. "What would you like to order, sir?" she asked. Her voice was clear, steady, and serious. David blinked. Was this some kind of game? Was her mother or someone else nearby? He glanced around, but didn't see anyone. "Are you here alone? Isn't there anyone working?" he asked, alert now. The girl answered without hesitation, "My mom's in the kitchen. We don't have money to hire anyone. She cooks, I serve." There was no pity or complaint in her voice. It was as natural to her as taking out the trash. David studied her for a moment. The shape of her eyes, her forehead, the slight curve at the corner of her mouth. Something felt familiar, but his mind was cloudy. There was a flicker of recognition deep down, but it didn't quite click. "Can I talk to your mom?" he asked, his voice softening. The girl nodded and went to the kitchen. For some reason, David's heart was racing. Maybe it was the silence, or that strange familiarity in the girl's face, or maybe it was just a feeling, something he couldn't explain. When the kitchen door opened, time froze. First he saw the flour-stained apron, then the messy hair pulled back, the rag slung over her shoulder. The woman looked up. Their eyes met. His breath caught. "David." Her voice was shaky, barely a whisper, but it was enough. In that moment, silence crashed over him. He stood up, slowly, looking into her eyes. "Amelia?" It had been 6.5 years. 6.5 years since he boarded a plane and never looked back. The dreams they shared, the promises, the little life they tried to build together. He'd left all of it behind. While building his future, he had never once stopped to think about how she might be. But now, there she was, hands covered in flour, eyes tired but steady. And the little girl who had just taken his order wasn't just her daughter. She was their daughter. Amelia needed a few seconds to be sure the man standing in front of her was really David. But she recognized his voice, that old warmth, the slightly cracked tone that still lingered at the edge of her heart. Time might make people forget everything, but some voices, some glances, some betrayals get etched into your body. David, on the other hand, stood frozen, as if his whole body had been taken hostage by some invisible weight. The little girl Lenny tried to come back into the kitchen, but Amelia gently placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder and sent her back. "Take that water to the table." "Okay, sweetie," she said quietly. Lenny nodded and left. Then she turned to David. Her hands were clasped together, gripping the back of the chair she had just pulled out. "What are you doing here?" Amelia asked. Her tone had no yelling, no bitterness, just quiet shock. and the trembling echo of 1,000 unanswered questions stuck inside her. David cleared his throat. Forming words was harder than he expected. I didn't even know where I was going. I just got in the car. Then I saw this cafe. I came in. I didn't know I'd see you. See you both. I didn't know anything. Amelia nodded. She seemed somewhat understanding, but at the same time, there was a calm that felt like the silence before a storm. But you came. After 6 years, 7 months, and 3 days. Just for a cup of coffee. David took a step forward, then stopped. Lenny, that girl, he said, but couldn't finish the sentence. Something caught in his throat. She's my... Amelia squinted at him. She knew even before you said it, believe me. Her eyes are yours. She writes with her left hand. When she frowns, her lip curls just like yours. But most of all, I've seen how she looks around when she's alone. Like something's missing. Like she's always waiting. David's eyes welled up. It was a feeling a CEO wasn't used to. The hands that didn't shake during board meetings or conference calls were now gripping the edge of the table tightly. Why didn't you tell me? He asked in a hoarse voice. Not even a message. A letter. A call. Amelia leaned quietly against the wall by the stove. I tried once. Right after that, your number had changed. That day, that was the day I found out I was pregnant. Then you moved on to that big company. I read about your success in the papers. The rise of David Leaner. But I was working 2 jobs, spending hours at the register with a big belly. Honestly, I didn't try to reach out again. Because I knew I couldn't. And I guess, I didn't want to. At that moment, Lenny's voice came from the kitchen door. Is dinner ready? Amelia blinked. 5 more minutes, sweetie, she replied. Then turned back to David. Look, I'm not here to demand anything from you. You came, and you're standing in front of me. That alone is a miracle. But Lenny, you can't just walk into her life like this. Show up one day and disappear the next. She can't handle that. Even I barely did. David nodded. I can't promise I won't come, he said. But I'm ready to come back from where I've been. I'm done running. Amelia looked at him for a long time. Inside her were still hundreds of feelings she couldn't name, but she didn't speak them out loud. She just slowly lowered her head. Then stay. Eat something. A bowl of soup, a slice of bread. That's all we've got, really. David smiled slightly. Everything stuck in his throat was still there, but the smile loosened it a little. That soup might be the richest meal in the world right now. Amelia turned and went to the stove. David went back to his seat and took off his tie completely. As he looked out the window, the unease he felt when he first walked into the cafe was gone. In its place was a new kind of restlessness. The kind a man feels when he's finally starting to face the past he left behind. And that past now had a pair of eyes staring right at him. A 6-year-old question mark, wearing a red apron, named Lenny. When David took a spoonful of his soup, he realized for the first time that he was truly hungry. But the hunger wasn't just in his stomach, it was growing in his conscience, in the questions he'd silenced for years. The carrots in the soup were soft, the potatoes balanced with salt, but every bite showed him how Amelia had managed to survive all these years. Simple, but solid. Incomplete, but warm. Tired, but standing tall. Lenny quietly came back to the table and sat down. She rubbed her hands on the edge of her apron, then looked up. How do you two know each other? She asked her mother, but didn't take her eyes off David. Amelia froze at the stove for a second. David didn't look away. The moment had come, and this time, he couldn't run. I met your mom a long time ago, he said. Life was simpler then. We were young, brave, sometimes too brave. Lenny tilted her head. Were you in love? Instead of answering, Amelia grabbed a kitchen towel and dried her hands. David quietly nodded. Yes, he said. And I left without knowing you were coming. Lenny's face didn't change, just the look in her eyes. It showed something had clicked into place, like a missing piece had been found. Are you my dad? She asked, without any hesitation. David felt like his heart stopped beating in his chest. Time was suspended for a moment. That tiny voice held more proof than a 1,000-page file. There was no excuse he could run to. Only one option, the truth. Yes, he said. My name is David. And I'm your dad. Lenny didn't say anything. She slowly leaned back in her chair. Her eyes stayed locked, but her face was a storm of emotion. Her small hands clasped together. Then she gave a silent nod. Mom said my dad left a long time ago, but she never described his face. I kept drawing, kept trying. But I guess I don't have to draw anymore. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. She could feel a wall that had silenced them for years starting to crack. But just then, the cafe door slammed open. A gust of wind rushed in. Two men followed. Their jackets were dirty, their eyes alert. They didn't look like regular passersby. One of them walked straight to the counter. "Is this place still open?" he asked. His voice was impatient. Amelia instantly braced herself. "We're about to close. There's only soup left." The other man locked eyes with David. "You? I know you from somewhere," he said, then tilted his head slightly. Wait. Leaner. The tech guy, right? I saw you on TV. You're the dude who made those smart security systems." David set his spoon down. The silence suddenly became heavy. Amelia's face went pale. The man's eyes lit up. "What are you doing in a cafe like this, huh? Secret investment? Or hiding a scandal?" David tried to stay calm. "I just came for a coffee. Nothing special." But the men weren't buying it. The second guy laughed loudly. "No way he came alone," he said. "His company's worth billions. Maybe he's here to meet someone, huh?" His gaze shifted to Amelia. There was mockery in his eyes. David stood up. "If you want some soup, take it and go," he said. "This is just a small family-run place. We don't harm anyone." The men hesitated. But the mockery started turning into something else, opportunism. One of them slowly reached into his pocket. David's instincts kicked in. He'd built strategies in boardrooms, but he'd never faced physical tension like this. In that moment, he understood. Real life wasn't made of PowerPoint slides. "Take your hand out of your pocket," David said, his voice steady. Amelia quietly pulled Lenny into the back kitchen. Her eyes never left David. The little girl was scared, but silent. The man's hand was still in his pocket, but he pulled out a phone instead of a weapon. "Relax, boss," he said. "Just wanted a selfie. It's not every day you catch a billionaire in a rundown cafe." David exhaled, but didn't lower his guard. After a few mocking comments, the men left without even taking the soup. When the door slammed shut again, the air they left behind was still tense. Amelia narrowed her eyes. "Is that why you didn't tell anyone you were coming?" she asked. David nodded. "I was just running. But now I get it. This wasn't just my escape. I unknowingly opened a door into a world where you weren't safe either." Amelia stroked Lenny's head and whispered, "Then you're not turning your back and leaving this time. Because this isn't just your story anymore. It's hers too." David looked down at the floor. He knew what the next step was. And this time, he wasn't going to look back. The next morning, before the cafe had even opened, David came back. He stood at the door, looking up at the old sign. The sun was just rising, but a soft light was already glowing from inside. When he walked in, Amelia's arms were covered in flour. She turned her back to him, folding her sleeves. But David no longer expected her to run into his arms. He wasn't here to wait, he was here to build. Late, but determined. "Let me help," he said. Amelia turned around. Her look was slightly tired, slightly distant, but also oddly familiar. "Can you do it without spilling flour everywhere?" she asked. David picked up an apron. "I'll try," he said. That morning, David rolled up his sleeves for the first time. He cracked eggs, measured milk, even set off the fire alarm by burning a few pancakes. But with every burnt smell, every spilled bit of flour, it was like a piece of the past was being erased. Lenny sat at the edge of the table, drawing pictures. This time, the picture had 3 people: a man, a woman, and a little girl. 3 names were written in pencil above them. Mom, me, Dad. David swallowed hard when he saw it. He couldn't rewind everything, but he could start again every single day. They took a short break at a little coffee table in the middle of the cafe. Amelia, holding her coffee, looked out the window and asked, "Isn't your company trying to reach you?" David shrugged. "My phone's still in the back seat. There might be hundreds of missed calls, but I don't miss hearing any of them." Amelia turned her head. "What about the press? What if someone else recognizes you here? Like yesterday? What if they expose your real identity?" David looked down. "Then I'll tell them." David Leaner isn't just a CEO. He's also a father who showed up late. There was a pause. The kind of silence that comes from making peace with the past and laying the foundation for a shared future. Just then, the door opened. This time, it wasn't a familiar face, but it wasn't just a random one either. He wore a formal coat, carried a leather briefcase. A middle-aged man with measured eyes. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm looking for David Leaner. There's an urgent signing process. I've been sent from your company's legal department. Can you assist me?" Amelia looked at David, surprised. David frowned. How did they find you? He asked in a low voice. The man bowed his head slightly in apology. I'm sorry, sir. Your assistant tracked your GPS signals. I had to retrieve this address from private files. Amelia's expression shifted. Lenny tried to hide the picture she had drawn. David sighed. This isn't a company. This is a home. Leave. And tell the company there won't be any signatures today. And if they track me again, I'll personally dismantle every system we've built. The man stepped back, confused. Without saying anything, he closed the door and left. Amelia held her coffee mug tightly in her hands and asked, This is your life. Those signatures are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. One mistake could ruin everything. David looked her straight in the eyes. But this table, this girl, you, if I can't get this back, then I'm already ruined. Amelia thought for a moment. Then she stood up. As she walked back into the kitchen, she said just one sentence over her shoulder. If you want to prove something, this isn't enough. If you want to give Lenny a life, just staying here won't cut it. It needs to be official. David called out after her. What do you want? Financial support? School fees? Help with the house? Amelia stopped. Without turning her head, she whispered, No, David. Not words. Law. Joint custody. In that moment, David froze. Company shares, contracts, the media. This was more complicated than any of them. But at the same time, it could be the beginning of everything. By the time David left the cafe, the sky had already darkened, but inside, he felt a strange kind of light. Amelia's last sentence dash, not words. Law, joint custody, was still ringing in his ears. It wasn't a challenge. It was a test of trust, a call to action. And this time, he wasn't going to run. The next morning, he hit the road early. He didn't return to that flashy glass building, but he did open the door to a law office himself. He sat across from the attorney not as David Millionaire CEO, but as Lenny's father. The lawyer was surprised. Men like him usually requested carefully curated protocols to protect their reputations, mixing legal processes with media strategies. But David only asked one thing. What do I have to do to become a permanent part of her life? Documents were prepared, petitions written, signatures placed. And when David carried that briefcase back to the cafe, he wasn't walking like a man returning from a business deal. He was walking like a father taking responsibility. Amelia examined the papers carefully. Each page felt like a sentence that followed years of silence. The few minutes David stood waiting beside her may have been the longest of his entire CEO career. Amelia finally looked up. I need to read through these. Not right now. David nodded. Take your time. I just wanted for once for time to be on your side, not mine. That evening, the cafe closed early. After coming back from school, Lenny returned with a note in her hand. It was handwritten. Can I go get ice cream with my dad after school? David stared at the paper for a long moment. Then he turned to Lenny. Of course, he said, but on one condition. You choose, I pay. They didn't actually go to the ice cream shop, it had closed down. But there was an old market on the way. Inside, standing in front of the ice cream freezer, Lenny picked mint chocolate chip. David went for plain vanilla. Sitting in the car, eating with little plastic spoons, Lenny suddenly asked, Why did you leave? David held the ice cream in his mouth. Answering her was not as easy as swallowing a spoonful. Sometimes, he said finally, people get scared. They feel like they're not enough. And the worst part is, they run away so they don't drag someone else down with them. That's the mistake I made. But now I'm here not just to stay, but to grow. Lenny didn't say anything, but she reached out and took David's hand. Her small, cold fingers wrapped around his large, shaky palm. That night, Amelia invited them home. No, it wasn't an invitation to stay, it was permission to spend the evening together. For the first time, the house was small but warm. In Lenny's room, pink stars were drawn on the walls. Books lay scattered at the foot of her bed, and behind the door, a scribbled growth chart stretched toward the ceiling. As David looked at all of it, he slowly started to realize what had been missing in him. Life wasn't measured in stock value, it was measured in heart doodles drawn at age 5. When Lenny noticed David didn't have pajamas, she giggled. We can give you one of Mom's old t-shirts, she said. Amelia smiled as she walked toward the kitchen. David returned the smile with a quiet reply. One day, I'll leave my own pajamas here. Dinner was simple but unforgettable. Pasta from a pan, some yogurt, and fruit slices prepared by Lenny. After dinner, Lenny insisted, Tonight, you read me a story. David nodded. Of course. They sat together on an old rug and opened a storybook. Lenny gently leaned her head on David's arm. Her breathing slowed. Her eyelids grew heavy. David kept turning the pages. With each sentence he read aloud, he was rewriting a fatherhood that had once been erased. Amelia stood at the doorway, watching them. She didn't move for a long time. Then she turned and walked back to the kitchen. As she poured tea into her own mug, she could still hear David's voice. And the little girl, who lived in the middle of the forest with her mother, one day found her father. The father couldn't explain all the mistakes he'd made, but the little girl didn't need to hear them, because she already felt it. Her dad was finally there. As David looked at the book, a single tear slid from the corner of his eye. Lenny's head was still resting on his arm. Her eyes were already closed. In that moment, David felt like nothing was missing. That one evening filling in for all the lost years was worth a lifetime. A few weeks later, the inside of the cafe started to look a little different. Everything was still modest, but there were subtle changes in the details. The windows were cleaned more often. The tablecloths looked ironed. The bell on the door rang with a brighter jingle. These physical changes were really echoes of something else happening inside, a life being rebuilt. David came in every morning now. Sometimes he stayed just a few hours, sometimes the whole day, with a coffee cup in his hand and his laptop open on the table in the corner. But what he was doing wasn't really work. He was slowly putting the missing years back in place. Lenny quickly adapted to this new rhythm. She began to expect to see David every day. After school, she'd peek through the cafe window to check if her dad was inside. And David never missed a day, because this time, he wasn't just there to show up, he was there to take root. Amelia, at first, was cautious. Still was. But time, much like sincerity, was a powerful healer. David showing up early every morning, carrying flour sacks, keeping track of the bills, placing Lenny's hair clips back into the kitchen drawer every day. These weren't grand gestures, but each one felt like a quiet vow. One Thursday evening, Lenny came back from school carrying a big piece of cardboard. On it, she had drawn a table with 3 chairs. Under each chair was a name: Mom, me, Dad. And above, in wobbly pencil letters, she had written, "It's not just a table anymore. It's our place now." Amelia couldn't speak when she saw it. She took the cardboard into her hands and walked behind the counter, avoiding their eyes. David hugged his daughter, and he cried not just for her, but for his own childhood, for memories left unfinished, for dinners that never happened. That night, David took over the kitchen. He was going to cook for the first time. The recipe didn't matter. Burnt rice, overcooked pasta, forgotten salt. All of it was acceptable, because it wasn't about the perfect plate, it was about the table built together. During dinner, Lenny asked quietly, "Daddy, you're not going to leave again, right?" David looked into her eyes. His answer wasn't a sentence, it was a decision. "In the morning, when you wake up, I'll be here. And every morning, again. Sometimes I'll make tea, sometimes I'll get breakfast ready. But I'll always be here. Because this is my life now." Amelia leaned back in her chair. For the first time in a long time, she let herself fully relax into it. It felt like her muscles had loosened not in months, but in years. "I'm not looking for a reason to believe you anymore," she said. "As long as you keep showing up every morning, I don't need anything else." That night, Lenny handed David her favorite stuffed bear. "This is the bear I used to hold when I was scared. I can give it to you now, because I'm not scared anymore." David would never forget that moment. It was the kind of approval no business meeting, investment chart, or $1 million deal had ever given him. A child handing over her fear to an adult. That weekend, Amelia closed the cafe for a day. She set up a table for just 3. A candle in the middle, next to Lenny's drawing of their family table. A simple celebration. No cake, no balloons. But now, every chair held a meaning. Forgiveness, starting over, and becoming whole. After dinner, Lenny suggested a sleepover. Pillows were spread across the rug. The lights dimmed. David lay down with a child and a whole life in his arms. Amelia sat at the bedside and asked one last time, "If you're really ready, one day you won't just come here in the mornings. You'll move in for good. You know that, right?" David closed his eyes. "I know, and I want to." Lenny's final whisper that night sealed it all. "We're a family now, right, Mom?" Amelia smiled. "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "Now we are." And after that night, a small new drawing appeared on the cafe's sign by the door, drawn by Lenny's hand. 3 people, 1 table, and underneath it, here, not just the coffee but the family stays warm.